morning, hoppers. This is Mrs. Sutliff with your writing lesson for the day. Writers, I was curious, how many of you have at least 2 full pages about your topic in your notebook? How many of you have more? Well, maybe you didn't know this, but lots of researchers say that students need to be able to write at least 2 pages in a single sitting. In about 30 minutes of writing time, you should be able to fill a couple pages. So you really should have more than a couple pages in your notebook already. I'm thinking about all of the time that we've had to work on this topic that we've been writing about. So there is my challenge for you. Every time you sit down and have 30 minutes of writing time, you should really push yourself, especially if you have a notebook and a pen in front of you, to fill 2 pages. That looks different when you're typing, but when you're writing in your notebook, you can really tell if you are on par with where students your age should be if you can fill 2 whole pages in about 30 to 45 minutes of writing time. Really remember that and think about it and push yourself to meet that standard every time. Of course, I want you to think about how longer and more like trying to fill the page kind of writing could be worse writing than writing to really have high quality. So you have to find a balance between quality and quantity, and that's what revising is all about. That's the writing process step that we are going to work on today. So let's hop right in with our learning targets. Today I want to teach you that when you are writing an information text, that text, whether it is the whole book or just a chapter of the book, it needs to be organized. It needs to follow a plan, and you really need to give the reader some hints early on with an introduction, what exactly is going to be in each section. Okay? Another way that you can help keep your writing organized is to write an ending or a conclusion for each section of your writing to bring that section to a close so it feels like you're finished teaching us about that subtopic. And then another way, a really important way that you keep organized is with transition words. So these are our learning targets for today. Up here mostly we'll be doing introductions and conclusions mostly today, and then tomorrow we'll talk about transitions. So you're going to be using some anchor charts today to help you flash draft introductions and conclusions while you are typing. Writers, I want to talk about something that isn't really about writing, and then we'll come back to talking about writing. So for just a moment, I want you to imagine that we have some new kids in town, and they're in our class, okay? They've never been in our town before, and I want you to imagine that I have asked you to take these new kids on a tour of the town. You're going to be their tour guide in a way. So right now, would you think about the main places that you would take these kids? Think about the order of your tour from step to step, how you would go about town. Okay, so if I was going to do this, where would be the first place I would go? Probably downtown. I would start downtown, and I would have a section of my tour that is focused on just downtown, and I could even break downtown up into smaller steps too. For example, I could go to Main Street Square, and then I could go around to some of the other shopping and restaurant locations in the downtown, and while we're doing that, we could visit all of the president's statues. Okay, so that's like at least 3 different things about one small area of our town, and each of those things could have a section. And then from downtown, I might move over to Mount Rushmore Road, and we'd go to some of the historical shops down Mount Rushmore Road, and maybe we would grab lunch while we're down there. And then we might continue on down Mount Rushmore Road and head up into the Black Hills, and maybe we would stop at Reptile Gardens on the way to Mount Rushmore. Okay, so here's the tie-in with writing. Hoppers, when you write information texts, you are sort of taking your learners, your readers, on a tour of your subject. And the people on your tour expect you to give them an overview, or kind of like this is what we're going to do first. And that comes early on before the tour starts. Okay, they kind of expect a version of, first we'll visit this place, and then we'll do this thing, and then we'll end our tour in this area, and then you can grab dinner while we're out there, sort of thing. Here's the thing, learners. Your reader is going to expect that overview at the start of your report for each section. Each of your sections needs a little mini introduction, just the way that your whole entire report needs an introduction. So let's imagine how we might write such an overview of your topic. And we're going to take a look at some suggestions with an anchor chart here. Here are my tips for you, ways to start a section of your report. Please understand that this is an introduction. However, it is a mini introduction for each of your sections. Okay, each of these is talking about the section. And when I say section, I mean you picked subtopics for your main topic. Like my main topic is Japan, but my subtopic that I'm going to be using as an example for this video is the geography of Japan. And that was a descriptive text structure that I picked for that mini section. So hopefully that just reminds you of what I'm talking about when I say section. Okay, so here's some things you can try with your little mini introductions. You can ask and answer a question. Remember that question has to be related to your tiny topic, your subtopic. Okay, moving on, you can share a shocking fact about just that little section, that little subtopic. You could try a mini story. Mini stories have 3 sentences, and it should be tied in with that section. And the last suggestion I have for you is connect back to the last section. And you can do that if it's not your first section. If it's your first section, that's a little tricky to connect back to a previous section. Obviously, you can't do that. So you'll have to try that with a later section. This one is especially good if the sections are related somehow. So an example of that might be talking about the history after I give you a brief geography lesson about my topic, because in my history lesson, I'll be talking about some of the places that I just mentioned in my geography section, so they would be related. Okay, let's take a look at how I do this with just one section in my Japan report. This is my geography section. Did you know that Japan is the world's 62nd largest country, but it has the world's 10th largest population? Notice how I started. What option did I pick for my little mini introduction for my section? You probably noticed it's a question. I asked a question, and now my whole entire section is going to be about answering that question. Okay, so reading on, I say, it has about 144,000 square miles shared by over 127 million people. The tiny country is made up of a group of islands, and most people live in the cities. The islands are covered in mountains and surrounded by the Sea of Japan, the Philippine Sea, and the Pacific Ocean. The neighboring countries are China, Russia, North and South Korea, and Taiwan. All right, so just reading that for you, hopefully you've got a good idea of what a geography section might include, but what I really want you to focus on is my introduction. How did I start teaching you about this little section? Okay. For me, asking a question was really easy. A did you know type question. And wow, that really was an interesting fact. And I even was able to elaborate on it with some specific details following right after that. This is an excellent mini introduction for my section. While you're typing your report today, you are going to be adding in these little mini introductions and then typing your information from your notebook. And then you will shift gears, and before you go on to the next section, you will type a mini conclusion for each section. So let's move on and see what we do with conclusions for our mini sections. These are my suggestions for how to end a section or subtopic of your report. You could think of these as mini chapters. They need an ending before you move on to the next one. So some suggestions: you could write a connection to the beginning of the section. This might sound like you asking the readers to think back on how you introduced the subtopic and maybe making sure you answered that question that you brought up at the beginning of the section. Okay, another way to end a section is to write a sneak peek of the next section that you have in your report. And this works especially well if the two sections are similarly related, like I was talking about before. I might use this strategy after my geography section as I'm going into my history section, and I might say something like, in the next section you will learn more about these places and the events that happened in those places throughout Japan's history. That's a really good transition, but also a way to end the section and start the next one. Next recommendation I have for you is explain why the information matters, especially if you're talking about history. This would be a good way to end that section about Japan's history. Why does any of this information matter now, today? And my last recommendation or suggestion for how to end a section of your report is to leave readers with something to think about. Maybe a question that you found that you couldn't really give a good answer to, or you weren't really satisfied with the answer you found and you really want to keep thinking about it. Encourage your readers to keep thinking about it too. This is actually the one that I decided to do for my example geography section. So let's take a look at how I continue on with my geography section and then how I ended that section. Reading on here, Japan has a famous mountain called Mount Fuji. Many restaurants are named after that mountain, which is a very special place to the Japanese people. Mount Fuji is 12,388 feet high, and it is the highest mountain in Japan. With all those mountains on such a small collection of islands, I wonder if it gets really crowded in the cities of Japan. Looking at the map, you should see that most of the cities are on the coast. Japan has more than 18,000 miles of coastline. Maybe it is flatter on the coast. Hopefully you notice how I have left my reader with something to think about, because I'm still thinking about it, and I'm even sort of inferring that maybe there is more space than it seems like there should be because the coastline is really flat. And I came to that conclusion because I looked at the map. And that reminds me that I really need to make sure that I have a map for this section. So that'll be one of my text features. And we'll talk more about adding text features later. Something that I don't want you to get too distracted by now, especially because I know I've had some students showing you how to do that. Today we are typing. We are typing our information from our notebook, but also tagging onto the beginning and the ending of our information with our own way to introduce and end each subtopic. But you haven't really had a whole lot of time to practice it yet. So I want you to reply to this video on Edmodo and try it right now. You're going to share a subtopic section for your report, tell us what the section is, and then write an introduction for the section, or write a conclusion for the section. You'll find that they actually sound rather similar, and it might even be a little tricky to figure out which one, as you're reading and watching others try this in class today, is that an introduction or is that a conclusion? I can't really tell because they are very similar, and that's why we're talking about them together. I really strongly encourage you to try this right now. If you're feeling a little nervous, you can watch how others try it first, but the more people we have participating and replying to this video, the better I'll feel about whether or not you really get what we're trying to do. You can also look for another example from me. I'll be posting an example about 15-20 minutes into the writing workshop, so you can try looking at my other example as well. So go ahead and pause this right now and do this for me, and then you can push play when you're done. Okay, here are your directions for writing time today, hoppers. Please make sure that you pause the video right here, and you can minimize your window by hitting the escape key, but if you keep the video on this slide right here, then you can tab back and forth as you're going from your notebook to the computer on the OneDrive, and you can look at these anchor charts again, the ways to start a section of your report and the ways to end a section of your report. I put them on here because I figured they would be really helpful to you. So while you're writing today, first you are going to choose the next section that you want to type and think of at least one sentence, maybe a couple sentences. It'll be 3 sentences if you decide to write a mini story down here to start your section. So start your section by typing just from the anchor chart, and then go to your notebook and type the information you have in your notebook, and then you'll be ready to think about how you started, thinking back to this introduction you did, and then typing an ending that kind of feels like they go together, so that your beginning and your ending are kind of like 2 bookends holding books on a bookshelf. Okay? So then you'll write a sentence or 2 to end your section. Hopefully, 4th graders, you are getting fast enough at typing that you might be able to do this a couple times today. Let's be productive. Let's really work hard on following these directions, leaving this video paused right here on the screen, and let me know if you have questions by typing a question on Edmodo. You might find other kids can answer your questions too, and you won't have to wait for me to respond. That's it for today. Happy writing and hop to it, hoppers.